You never think it'll happen to you until it does. I've been a high school English teacher in Millfield my entire adult life. Everyone knows me here. Students come back years later to tell me how my class changed their perspective on literature. I'm not special, just a guy who loves his job and his community. That all changed the day I ran into Officer Derek Walton at Greenfield Grocery. Just a normal Thursday afternoon, grabbing some groceries before heading home to grade papers. I still replay that moment in my head, reaching for a box of cereal and accidentally bumping my cart into his. A simple mistake that anyone could make. Something that should have ended with a quick sorry about that and moving on with our days. But Officer Walton didn't see it that way. This guy immediately turned red in the face, like I'd personally insulted his entire family lineage. He was off duty but still in uniform, and man, did he want me to know he was a cop. Started berating me right there in the middle of the cereal aisle about carelessness and respect for law enforcement. Over a shopping cart. I kept apologizing, thinking surely this guy would calm down if I just showed enough remorse for the great crime of bumping his cart. People were staring, looking uncomfortable, but nobody stepped in. That's what a uniform does. It makes everyone else freeze. When I finally tried to just walk away from this complete overreaction, Walton grabbed my arm so hard I dropped my basket. Eggs cracked on the floor, apples rolling everywhere. And then, I still get cold sweats thinking about this moment, he unholstered his gun. An actual service weapon, pointed at my face, in the middle of a grocery store, because of a shopping cart collision. He's yelling that I'm resisting and behaving erratically. Me! The guy who helps old ladies reach high shelves and who volunteers at the community theater. I just stood there, completely frozen, staring down the barrel of his gun, thinking about my students finding out their teacher got shot reaching for Lucky Charms. Thank God for Ray Thompson, the store manager. He saw everything on the security feed and called the police station immediately. And thank God for the customers who had their phones out recording. Walton eventually put his gun away when he realized he had an audience, but not before threatening to arrest me if I caused any more trouble. Like I was the problem. Like I was the one who pulled a gun over nothing. I went home shaking that night, barely slept, kept seeing that gun pointed at my face every time I closed my eyes. The next morning I filed a formal complaint with the Millfield Police Department. Gave them names of witnesses, times, every detail I could remember. I thought naively that they would take this seriously. That they'd recognize this was completely unacceptable behavior from one of their officers. I was raised to believe in the system, you know? To believe that authorities would do the right thing when presented with clear evidence. What an idiot I was. When I followed up a week later, they claimed there was no record of me ever filing anything. Like I had hallucinated the whole process. Like I hadn't sat in that sterile interview room for 2 hours giving my statement. I know my cousin Jeff works as a court clerk, so I asked him to look into it. He confirmed what I suspected. My complaint had been received, but was marked resolved without investigation. They just made it disappear. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with one bad cop. I was dealing with a system that protected its own. And that's also when the real nightmare began. Walton started driving by my house. Not just once, but multiple times a day, crawling past at 5 NPA, making sure I saw him watching me. Following me to and from work. Parking outside the school where I teach and just sitting there, staring through his windshield. I installed security cameras at my house, not just for evidence but because I honestly didn't feel safe anymore. The very first night, those cameras caught Walton tampering with my mailbox at 2 a.m. A federal offense committed by a police officer, and I had it on video. But who was I supposed to report it to? His buddies at the department who had already buried my complaint. Then my car tires got slashed in the teacher's parking lot. No cameras in that section of the lot, of course. Just a coincidence, I'm sure. 4 tires, all punctured in the same way. Cost me $800 I didn't have. 3 weeks into this harassment campaign, I got a traffic ticket in the mail. Supposedly, I ran a stop sign on Elm Street at 7:30 a.m. 2 days earlier. Except I was in the middle of first period at that time, teaching 30 teenagers about Macbeth. The ticket was signed by Officer Walton, who wasn't even there for this violation that never happened. At that point, I knew I needed to document everything meticulously. I started carrying a small voice recorder everywhere. kept a detailed journal of every incident, saved every piece of evidence I could. Jeff told me something that chilled me to the bone. Walton had accessed my personal information through the police database multiple times. My address, my driving record, my background check, everything. All without authorization. Things got worse when I found my classroom had been broken into. Nothing was stolen, but my desk drawers were clearly rummaged through, papers shuffled around. A fellow teacher pulled me aside after school and showed me security footage of Walton entering the building after hours, flashing his badge at the night janitor like he had official business there. In the footage, he headed straight for the English department. I felt violated in a way I can't even explain. This man was systematically invading every aspect of my life, and I felt completely powerless to stop him. I finally contacted attorney Sarah Daniels, who specializes in police misconduct cases. The look on her face when I laid out the evidence told me everything I needed to know about how serious this was. She didn't sugarcoat it. Cases against cops are uphill battles, especially in small towns where everyone knows everyone. But she agreed to help me. Said my documentation was exactly what we needed to build a case. Meanwhile, Walton's superiors continued to dismiss my complaints. The internal affairs officer, who I later found out was Walton's drinking buddy, conducted the most half-assed interview you can imagine, making it clear he thought I was just some hysterical schoolteacher making mountains out of molehills. My attorney advised me to avoid direct confrontation with Walton while we gathered evidence. Keep my head down, keep recording everything, and let her handle the legal side. But it's hard to keep your head down when there's a police cruiser idling outside your classroom window. My students noticed. Asked me if I was in some kind of trouble. I started having anxiety attacks but tried to hide them. Last thing I needed was to look unstable in front of 30 teenagers. Then the notes started appearing in my faculty mailbox. Anonymous, threatening garbage. All in the same handwriting that I recognized from my traffic ticket. Walton wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. This vendetta seemed to consume Walton entirely. Other officers at the department started noticing he wasn't responding to dispatch calls while on duty. The police chief finally called him in after multiple complaints. Walton claimed he was conducting special surveillance on a suspected drug dealer, but couldn't provide any documentation. That's when they put him on administrative duty. Restricted his access to patrol vehicles, limited his authority. But that just made him angrier, more desperate. And guess who became the target of that desperation? I was loading groceries into my car after school one Friday when Walton confronted me in the parking lot. Cornered me between my car and the cart return. Started threatening me, saying he'd ruin my life if I didn't drop all the complaints against him. What he didn't know was that I'd been wearing that voice recorder ever since the first incident. Caught every word as his tirade escalated, as he admitted to tampering with my complaint file, to accessing my personal information illegally. And then, for the second time, he pulled his service weapon on me. Pointed it right at my chest while demanding I sign some statement he'd prepared saying all my allegations were false. Neither of us realized there was a delivery driver for the grocery store filming the whole thing from nearby. This kid, couldn't have been more than 20, captured clear footage of an armed officer threatening me without provocation. He immediately sent the video to the local news station before Walton could stop him. When Walton noticed the kid filming, he panicked, tried to confiscate the phone. But the smart kid had already uploaded the footage to a cloud account. It was out there now, beyond Walton's reach to bury or delete. Walton must have realized he was in trouble because he went straight back to the station and accessed the evidence room. Deleted the security footage from the grocery store that had been collected after my initial complaint. Then falsified his duty log to create an alibi for all the times he'd been stalking me. What he didn't realize was that the GPS data from his patrol car had already been automatically uploaded to the department's central database. Technology, it'll get you every time. My attorney compiled everything. The recordings, the falsified documents, witness statements, tampered evidence records into a comprehensive legal filing against both Walton and the department. The district attorney, facing pressure after the delivery driver's video aired on local news, had no choice but to open a criminal investigation. Suddenly, Walton's fellow officers weren't so protective anymore. Amazing how quickly that thin blue line disappears when someone becomes a liability. During questioning, Walton's own partner admitted that Walton had bragged about teaching that teacher a lesson and had asked for help accessing sealed records. The Internal Affairs investigation uncovered 7 previous civilian complaints against Walton that had mysteriously vanished from his personnel file over the years. 7. I wasn't the first person this guy had terrorized. I was just the first one who documented everything so thoroughly they couldn't make it disappear. Forensic analysis of the department's computer system showed that Walton had used the chief's login credentials to access and alter records multiple times. They placed him on unpaid leave, took his badge and gun. But even that wasn't enough to stop him. In a final desperate act, Walton broke into my house to plant evidence. Came in through the back door with a crowbar while I was at a meeting with my attorney. What he didn't know was that my security system sends real-time alerts to my phone. I called the police immediately. They responded and found Walton still inside my home, wearing gloves, with a bag containing drugs he intended to plant among my belongings. Caught red-handed by his own colleagues. They arrested him on the spot. Breaking and entering, evidence tampering, official misconduct, aggravated assault, illegal use of a firearm, stalking, harassment, abuse of authority. The charges piled up fast. The district attorney pursued maximum charges, refusing any plea deal as evidence continued to mount. Walton's police union initially tried to defend him but withdrew support after reviewing what he'd done. The judge denied bail after prosecutors presented evidence that Walton had researched how to flee to countries without extradition treaties. I testified at his preliminary hearing, brought all my documentation, laid out every incident of harassment and intimidation in excruciating detail. Body camera footage from other officers revealed conversations where Walton had made threatening comments about me, directly contradicting his sworn statements. Computer forensics experts testified that Walton had searched my name in restricted databases over 40 times, accessed my financial information, medical records, even my college transcripts without authorization. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before finding him guilty on all counts. The judge cited his extraordinary abuse of public trust when sentencing him to 15 years in prison without possibility of parole. As they led him away in handcuffs, I just stood there silently. I wasn't happy or relieved, just exhausted, completely drained from months of living in constant fear, all because some power-tripping cop couldn't handle accidentally being bumped with a shopping cart. I never asked for any of this, never wanted to be in a position where I had to fight against someone who was supposed to protect and serve. But there I was, standing in that courtroom, watching a man in a uniform be led away in chains, because he thought his badge gave him the right to terrorize an ordinary citizen. People keep telling me I'm brave for standing up to him, for not backing down. But I didn't feel brave. I felt cornered. And a cornered animal will do whatever it takes to survive. That's all I did. I survived. It started with a shopping cart and ended with a 15-year prison sentence. Sometimes I still look over my shoulder when I'm buying groceries. Still feel my heart race when I see a police cruiser in my rearview mirror. Still wake up in cold sweats thinking about that gun in my face. The physical threats are gone, but the mental scars, those don't disappear when the gavel comes down. They stay with you. Remind you that the world isn't as safe as you once thought it was. That the people meant to protect you might be the very ones you need protection from. The department issued a formal apology. Promised new training protocols, better oversight, more accountability. As if policy changes could undo the trauma of having a gun pointed at your face in a grocery store. As if new procedures could erase the feeling of being hunted in your own community by someone with a badge and the power to destroy your life. They offered me a settlement to avoid a civil lawsuit. My attorney says it's a good offer, that I should take it and try to move on. But how do you put a price tag on feeling safe in your own home? How do you quantify the cost of looking over your shoulder every day for months? Some people in town still look at me sideways, like I'm the one who did something wrong. Like I'm the troublemaker who got a good cop fired. The thin blue line runs deep in small towns like Millfield. But others have come forward with their own stories about Walton, now that it's safe to speak up. Turns out I wasn't the first, just the one who finally had enough evidence to make it stick. Makes me wonder how many others are out there, enduring similar harassment from people in positions of power, too afraid or too hopeless to fight back. I'm still teaching at the same high school, still living in the same house. I refuse to let Walton chase me out of the life I built for myself. But things are different now. I'm different. More cautious. Less trusting. Always watching. Always documenting. The administration suggested I take some time off, but what would I do at home? Sit and replay that gun in my face over and over. At least in the classroom, surrounded by literature and students who depend on me, I can sometimes forget for a few hours what happened. It's been 6 months since the sentencing. 6 months of trying to reclaim some sense of normalcy. The reporters have moved on to newer stories. The community has largely forgotten. But I haven't. Can't. Every time I walk into that grocery store, I feel my pulse quicken. Every time I see a police uniform, I feel my body tense. Not all cops are like Walton. I know that intellectually. But my body doesn't seem to have gotten the memo. Fight or flight doesn't respond to rational arguments. It responds to trauma, to memories of danger that burn themselves into your brain. The therapist says it'll get easier with time, that the hypervigilance will fade. The nightmares will come less frequently. Maybe she's right. Maybe one day I'll walk through my own town without feeling like a target. Maybe one day I'll see a police car and not immediately check where the nearest exit is. Maybe. But that day isn't today. Today, I'm still the guy who stood up to a corrupt cop and won. But at what cost? My peace of mind? My sense of security? My belief in the system? All of the above and then some. I wish I could say there was some silver lining, some lesson learned, some growth that came from this ordeal. But, honestly, all I learned is that power corrupts, and when it does, the victims are regular people just trying to live their lives. People like me, who never wanted to be warriors or martyrs or test cases. People who just wanted to teach English and go grocery shopping without having a gun pulled on them. Is that really too much to ask? The day of the sentencing, after everyone had cleared out of the courtroom, one of the jurors approached me. An older woman, probably in her 70s. She took my hand and said something I'll never forget. This wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been so stubborn. Not as a criticism, but as a compliment. She was right. If I had backed down, if I had signed that false statement, if I had moved away, or kept quiet or accepted that this was just how things were, Walton would still be out there with a badge and a gun, terrorizing someone else. My stubbornness, my refusal to be intimidated, my meticulous documentation, that's what brought him down. So I guess if there's any advice I can offer anyone going through something similar, it's this. Document everything. Record everything. Save everything. Because the word of someone with power will always carry more weight than yours, unless you have irrefutable evidence proving otherwise. The system isn't designed to believe you over them. You have to make it impossible for them not to believe you. And even then, be prepared for one hell of a fight. 15 years, without possibility of parole. That's what Walton got for what he did to me. Is it enough? I don't know. Is any prison sentence enough to make up for months of psychological torture? For making me afraid in my own home, my own classroom, my own town? For changing the way I see the world and my place in it? Probably not. But it's something. It's accountability. It's consequences for actions. It's proof that sometimes, just sometimes, the system works the way it's supposed to. As they led Walton away in handcuffs, he looked at me one last time. No remorse in his eyes. No acknowledgement of the harm he'd caused. Just cold hatred, like I was still the enemy for having the audacity to stand up to him. That look told me everything I needed to know about why he did what he did. It was never about the shopping cart. It was about power, about control, about making someone smaller to make himself feel bigger. And when I refused to be made small, when I fought back with everything I had, it just made him more determined to break me. Well, he didn't break me. Bent me, scared me, changed me, yes. But didn't break me. I'm still here. Still teaching. Still living. And he's the one who lost everything. His job, his freedom, his reputation. All because he couldn't handle a random accident in a grocery store. All because he thought his badge made him untouchable. All because he picked the wrong person to try to intimidate into silence. I wasn't special, wasn't particularly brave or connected or powerful. I was just stubborn enough and careful enough to make sure he couldn't get away with it. The school year is ending soon. I've been nominated for Teacher of the Year again, which feels surreal given everything that's happened. My students have been amazing through all of this. Supportive without being intrusive, concerned without being pitying. They're the reason I kept pushing forward on the worst days. The reason I didn't just pack up and leave town when things got scary. Because what kind of example would that set? What would it teach them about standing up to bullies, about fighting injustice, about persevering through hardship? My cousin Jeff still works at the court clerk's office. Says Walton's case file is thick as a phone book now. Says Walton's lawyer is already trying to appeal the sentence, claiming the jury was biased by media coverage. Standard procedure, apparently. Not likely to go anywhere given the mountain of evidence. But it still keeps me up at night sometimes. The thought of him getting out early, coming back to finish what he started. Rational or not, that fear lingers like a bad smell you can't quite get rid of. I've thought about moving. Starting fresh somewhere new where nobody knows my story. Where I'm not that teacher who got a cop sent to prison. But that feels too much like letting Walton win. Like admitting he succeeded in driving me out, just not in the way he intended. So I stay. Rebuild my sense of safety brick by brick. Find new grocery stores where I don't have flashbacks in the cereal aisle. Develop new routines that help me feel secure. It's not the life I had before, but it's a life. And it's mine. No one gets to take that away from me. Not even a man with a badge and a gun. The civil lawsuit against the department is still pending. My attorney says we have a strong case for negligent supervision, for allowing Walton's behavior to escalate unchecked for years. The chief resigned last month, claimed it was for personal reasons, but everyone knows the real story. Several other officers have been reassigned or put on leave as the investigation continues to uncover the full extent of the department's failures. Small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. At least some systemic change might come from this nightmare. People ask if I hate cops now, if I've lost faith in law enforcement entirely. The truth is more complicated than that. I hate abuse of power, whether it comes from someone with a badge or without one. I hate systems that protect the guilty and silence the innocent. I hate having to fight so hard just to be believed when I was telling the truth all along. But mostly I hate that what happened to me isn't unique or even unusual. That there are Derek Waltons in departments across the country, terrorizing citizens with impunity until someone finally catches them in the act. The delivery driver who filmed Walton threatening me that day in the parking lot, Kyle his name is, he's in my wife's biology class now. Started college this semester. Says he wants to go into law. Sometimes the world works in strange ways. Without his quick thinking, without his bravery and standing up to an armed officer, things might have gone very differently for me. Small actions can have massive consequences. A shopping cart bump leads to a 15-year prison sentence. A random kid with a phone camera becomes the key witness in a criminal case against a corrupt cop. Life is weird like that. Some days are harder than others. Some days I can almost forget what happened, can almost feel normal again. Other days, the smallest trigger, a siren in the distance, a uniform in a restaurant, even just a particularly authoritative voice, can send me spiraling back to that moment in the grocery store, staring down the barrel of Walton's gun. My therapist calls it PTSD. Says it's a normal response to abnormal events. Says healing isn't linear. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Some days I believe her. Some days I wonder if I'll ever truly feel safe again. The hardest part to explain to people who haven't been through something like this is the isolation. The way it separates you from normal life, from people who haven't had their faith in the system shattered. They still live in a world where calling the police when you're in trouble is the obvious solution, not a potential escalation of danger. They still believe that if you haven't done anything wrong, you have nothing to fear. They haven't learned what I was forced to learn, that innocence is no protection against someone who has decided to make you their target. Walton's preliminary hearing was a nightmare. having to sit there while his attorney painted me as unstable, vindictive, attention-seeking, suggesting I had some vendetta against law enforcement, that I'd fabricated or exaggerated everything. Thank God for the evidence, for the recordings and videos and witness statements that backed up every word I said, for the forensic experts who testified about Walton's unauthorized database searches, his tampering with evidence. Without that mountain of proof, it would have been my word against his. And we all know whose word carries more weight in those situations. The trial itself was surprisingly quick. The prosecution's case was airtight. The defense had nothing substantial to work with. Walton took the stand, tried to claim he felt threatened by me that day in the grocery store. That pulling his gun was a justified response to perceived danger. The jury didn't buy it. Not with multiple witnesses and videos showing me standing there with a box of cereal, making no threatening moves whatsoever. Not with his documented history of intimidation and harassment following the incident. Not with the evidence of him breaking into my house to plant drugs. When the verdict came back, guilty on all counts, I felt nothing. Not relief, not satisfaction, not vindication. Just hollow exhaustion. Like I'd been running a marathon for months and finally crossed the finish line, too depleted to even celebrate. The judge's words during sentencing stuck with me, though. Extraordinary abuse of public trust. That's exactly what it was. Walton wasn't just another citizen who harassed me. He was someone entrusted with power and authority, who weaponized that trust against an innocent person. That's what made his actions so egregious, so worthy of severe punishment. As they led Walton away in handcuffs, I stood there silently in the courtroom. Didn't cheer, didn't smile, didn't react at all. Just watched as the man who had turned my life upside down for months was finally facing consequences for his actions. I'd imagined this moment so many times during the darkest days of his harassment campaign. Thought it would feel triumphant, cathartic. Instead, it just felt final. The end of a chapter I never wanted to be part of in the first place. Not a victory so much as a cessation of hostilities. The media wanted interviews afterward. Wanted me to become the poster boy for police accountability. Wanted sound bites and heartfelt statements about justice being served. I declined them all. This was never about publicity or platforms or making a point. It was about one man abusing his power and another man refusing to be victimized. Simple as that. Let the legal experts and reform advocates pontificate about the broader implications. I just wanted to go home, sleep without nightmares for once, and try to remember what normal felt like before Officer Derek Walton decided to make me his personal target.